Dan Bublett's Comedy Productions.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
It's the art of bombing.
Bombing.
That's right. Welcome to an all-new episode of The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs Callbacks, where Josh, Shirley, and myself, Dan Bublitz Jr., call back the most recent episode. In this week's episode, we are calling back episode 293. Now I'm caught up, because last week that's where I thought we were, but now I've evened out. We're calling back episode 293.
This is the episode you've been waiting for.
I have been waiting for this for a while. Calling back episode 293 with Jennifer Sutherland, a fantastic comedian based in Denver, Colorado. We had a great conversation. We talked about a lot of things. And I think last week, Josh, we messed up. We did a couple. We're going to call ourselves out. We did a couple things. We did. We won. And we're going to do this right now. I think we forgot to give people a break to go back and listen to the episode. We just went right into what we wanted to talk about. So
does that mean we're doing two breaks today? Like to go back and listen to the episode before that episode and this one? Because
I don't think that's necessary. I don't think that's quite necessary. I think just owning up to it and making sure we do it this week is probably good. Because if they go back to episode 292 and then come back and listen to this episode, it ain't going to make any sense.
That's right.
Unless they listen to both. So should we let them go listen?
You know what? They can decide what to do with their time. Let's just go ahead and give them a break. Preferably you listen.
Oh, sorry, I cut you off there. I thought you were like, let's give him a break. And I was like, that's my cue.
That's okay, because I think we all wanted to spend our time doing different things. Mine was talking.
We did. You're talking to yourself in the blue room.
That's right. Which I did for about 56 minutes. While you listened to the episode, listeners, I was talking in the blue room here to myself.
Yeah, because I
wrote a couple songs.
I went and got coffee, and
I also wrote a massive hit that should be on the chart soon. I think it's called Dan is Here. So check that one out.
Man. I hope that music turned out good, because if it did, I'm clipping it. That's going at the end of one of these shows.
Oh yeah,
as a little blooper.
Good times, y'all. Hey, so great episode with Jennifer Sutherland, and there were a couple of different. Yeah, very good. Seems like she's got some experience, and whether it's comedy or her sketch stuff, she's been a performer, and she knows how to get in front of an audience and tell a story, and she's dealt with some stuff. So I thought that had a couple of distinct points. One of the questions that I wrote down when I was listening to it. And what do you think, Dan? Like, as a comic, what gives you what makes you more marketable? Like being a blue comic or being a clean comic? Like, what should you focus on developing?
Well, I mean, there's the old saying, it's cliche, but it's an old saying in comedy, clean is green. Obviously, if you focus on being a clean comedian, you are going to be more marketable. That's just the way it is. That's how you get on TV. Even dirty comedians, if they get on TV, they have to do a clean set while, they're not doing dirty material. So, there's that. going along with that, there's, corporate gigs, there's, that's where, some good money is as well. And a lot of times headliners actually prefer comics who work clean. So then even if they're a dirty comedian, they prefer somebody who works clean, because then if they decide that they don't want to be dirty that night, they don't have to be. Because I've always found an interesting aspect with blue versus clean is that you can follow blue with clean, or you can follow clean comedy with blue comedy, and it's not going to necessarily affect the show. But it's harder to follow blue comedy with clean comedy, and the reason that is because once you go down that road, you're bringing the audience to a certain place, and now they're there having fun. They want to continue going down that road. They don't want to be brought back to, oh, now we gotta Mr. Rogers this up,
Mhm.
if
Right.
that makes sense. So,
Yeah, it's kind of, you break the seal on blue comedy and you're there. Yeah, you
mhm.
can go back and forth a little, but you're right. It's definitely it, and I think worth noting that if you have an audience that you start blue with, and things aren't going well, then going clean after that won't necessarily save you, because you've already kind of crossed over, I guess.
Yeah,
Or if
absolutely.
yeah, just in the examples that Jennifer was talking about, there's different ways that you can kind of put the audience off.
Yeah.
And one of those things is saying something that offends somebody. And so if you start blue, if you have both, I think what you're saying is it's a good idea to start with cleaner stuff if you have both, if you don't know the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think with that, when it comes down to deciding, obviously clean comedy is always going to be more marketable. But am I saying you have to be a clean comedian? Absolutely not. If you don't want to be a clean comedian and you want to do things your way or whatever, that's the route you need to go. Whatever suits you best. Because I also think, it's kind of a case by case scenario and what your, each comic's goals are, where they're trying to go. But if your goal is to get on TV, get a late night spot or on, Comedy Central's not necessarily a real thing anymore. I mean, they exist, but I think most of the stuff they do comedy related is just getting put out on online or whatever. But, to get a late night spot, you have to be able to work clean and to get those credits. So it's definitely something to consider, at least have that in your tool belt. And that's one thing I always tell people. I've gotten labeled as a clean comedian, and I just kind of evolved into that. I don't consider myself a clean comedian in the sense that I'm just a comedian. I can work clean, but I can also work dirty. I like to have all the tools, because there's going to be some circumstances, and we talked a little bit about it, where you need to have all those tools.
Yeah,
Sometimes clean comedy just isn't going to get the attention of a rowdy bar crowd in some small town in the Midwest, and so you got to
that's
go
true.
lean into being a little dirtier, keep their attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you make a great point about being true to your voice. I
Yep.
think there's a lot of times, dirty or blue comedy doesn't work for somebody. And it's not because the audience is offended. It's because you don't wear it well.
Yeah,
They just don't
and
see it on you.
I'm that person. I
Sure.
I I
Sure.
know I'm that person because I've been
Yeah.
doing, working primarily clean. Like, I can go dirty, but sometimes it doesn't go well. Like, especially like I did a festival a couple years ago. They put me on one of the shows they booked me on was the dirty show. And I was just like, oh, well, I got some dirtier stuff, but uh, it just didn't go like it could have. And a lot of it was because I don't think it was believable. Like, my
Right.
persona just doesn't
Well,
translate to that.
sure. Yeah. And, you're going to have some different strengths, right? So,
Absolutely.
eh,
Well, and I think with that, you also have to consider your own moral code or your own moral
yeah.
compass as well when you're deciding if you want to be more clean or more blue. If you don't, there are comics who are obviously they're Christian comics, so they're going to try to, obviously they should be leaning more clean, but you really have to just at the end of the day, what how does it, what's your voice, what's your moral compass when in deciding, and what are your long-term goals? You got to factor in all that stuff. But like I said, at the end of the day, make sure you're doing what's aligned with you. if you don't just be clean because you're hoping to get a paycheck, because then the quality of your product's going to suffer. You're just going to wing it or, half-ass it. So that way you can get those gigs. You're more concerned about the money than the craft. And whether you go blue or whether you go clean, you should always be thinking about the craft and the art and how you can use it to, to make people laugh, and how you can get better at your craft, whether it's blue or clean comedy. You should always be working on getting better and evolving as a comedian.
Yeah, absolutely. And having these, different arrows in your quiver that you can use at different times is important. I'd have to say
you just had to change it.
Change
you just had to change it. I said tools in the toolbox, and you're like, arrows in the quiver. You had to make a better analogy than me.
Well, who's to say it's better? Arrows in the quiver might work for the archers in the crowd, and tools in the tool belt might work for the handy folk in the crowd.
I apologize. I did interrupt you though, but that was funny. What were you about to say?
Well, just that if I'm going to take a stance, I would say that every comic should have a clean set, meaning like no matter whether you're dirty or whether you're clean, have a clean set that you can use. And that's just like you said, it's the way it is. And I ran into 2 comics at the airport last week that I saw when I was kind of coming back from my own corporate gig. They were there, and asked them what was going on. They said they were auditioning for colleges in Houston, and it wasn't NACA. It was the other one. There's
2. Yeah. Yep. There's a couple of them. Yep.
The not NACA one. They're doing that one. And I guarantee you that and these are both not clean comedians. These, like, at their core, they're, probably a 6 or 7 on the dirty scale. They're there, but still not clean. I guarantee you they had to be clean in order to do that audition.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's just the business piece of this. Like Dan says, be dirty if that's you. Be true to your voice, but have some diversity in your material that allows you to be clean when you need to. Because those opportunities or those requirements are going to come up more often than having to be dirty. Not that they.
Yep. And to your point, a lot of comedy clubs, when you're coming up in a comedy club, they look at the clean comedians more right away for hosting because they are safer. They can put them in front of, they can put them in front of holiday parties and, this and that and, things, corporate types of things. And so they look at that too. So if you're trying to come up in a club, having that, like you said, like Josh said, having that ability to work clean can be beneficial. Definitely beneficial.
Yeah. Other thing that I thought about on this show that I thought was a great topic that we go into quite well on the show, but was worth exploring and fleshing out a little more here, was how to set and refocus when things outside of your comedy life are maybe dragging you down or negatively influencing your performance potentially. So meaning, how do we like check our baggage at the door? And maybe you can come up with a better analogy there, Dan. But how do you check your baggage at the door? The gauntlet's laid down.
How do we save and reset the Nintendo game at the door?
Oh, man, touche. He delivers. How do you leave your mom in the car? I don't know. But yeah. So that happens to us, right? We got bills to pay. We have family members that we got to take care of. We can lose our significant others and have bad relationships and get in a wreck on the way to the show. Bad moods. There's all kinds of things that can happen outside the show. How can you get your mind moving in a different direction? What do you do?
Well, for one, I before we get too far in this, I want to just say I think it also depends on the severity of the situation. I've seen comedians like that, you brought up a good point. You lost a significant other, maybe it's a breakup or somebody passes away, and they think that the best thing for them to do is go do comedy, and then they just basically have a nervous breakdown on stage, and it's awkward for them. It's awkward for the crowd. Nobody likes it. It's not great for anybody. I think you have to, it's okay to have a family emergency and not be able to do a show. You know what I mean? Like if somebody passes away or there's some severe family emergency, take care of your business. Comedy's still going to be there. People, we're all human. We understand that we all go through human types of things. Now, that being said, if it's just, a matter of stressing about, work or, making your bills and, little life things, one thing I try to do is I try to focus on comedy, where when I get to the show, I go into show mode. I do little things that are putting my brain in the motions, like little pre-show rituals, where it's like setting up my camera, getting that ready to record my set, going through writing my set list for that particular show, and figuring out what jokes, what order I'm going to do, that kind of thing. I like to go peek at the audience. Sometimes I like to see who's coming in, peek my head out the green room and see how rowdy the audience is or isn't, little things like that. So that's how I get into that mode, where once I cross the path, I'm in comedy mood. Sometimes I put my shirt on at the show. That's another way. Like if I have a long drive to a show, I don't wear my show clothes. I put them on when I get there, because that's also another way to, I think we've talked about this before, but you're changing your uniform. You're putting your uniform on. And so for that job. And so I'll do that when I get to the venue.
Great.
So those are things that I do. I don't know. What about you? What are things that you do to kind of reset? Because I know personally for me too, that this is another thing that helped me kind of get that change, be able to change my mindset, is somebody pointed out that when I was in a bad mood, I had bad energy on stage, and then they made me aware of it. And that's when I was like, oh man, I got to be more conscious of this, because sometimes you don't even realize you go in there. And that's why it's good to just have a technique to reset your mind no matter what. Even if you're in a good mood, you should still have something to reset to get you ready for comedy. But I keep going on and on. What do you do, Josh?
Well, so first of all, I agree with what you're saying about the severity of it, right? Don't push it. I mean, there's the whole Tig Notaro talks about having breast cancer the day after she finds out at, Lagos, big show. It's recorded. It's available. It's really widely. If you're new to comedy, this may be kind of a rite of passage you haven't gone through yet, but everybody likes to go find the Tig Notaro cancer set and listen to that. Now, it does unpack some good tenets for people on comedy. Like, you have to be true to yourself. You have to be able to keep the audience okay and establish that good equity with the audience if you want to talk about yourself. And she's able to do that in a way that keeps the show going, where they don't feel overly sympathetic for her. And the balance she's able to maintain on that, which is relevant to this episode too, is a good example of how to do that. But on the other hand, it's also lightning in a bottle, meaning like that it's an expert comedian able to make some things work that a new
skill level is definitely attributed. Skill level is definitely attributed to that.
So we're talking about a total master at the craft, and not something like to try at home for somebody who's new to comedy. So I'm putting that out there because I think it's a good way to do some additional research on the topics that came up on this episode. So that's number one. And
maybe we'll put a link in the show notes to that video. We'll try to find that and put that in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah, we'll try to find that for you and get it in there. So disclaimer is, like, don't try to do that if like that is something major that happened to her. Right. So that's a piece of it. The other thing, I think this will help people. Have a routine that you do before you perform. And when I heard you say, I put my clothes on, like, that's part of Dan's routine. Like, he does that he's a professional comic, and he's always going to a place to perform. So he's got this routine where he's putting his clothes on and getting dressed for the show. And I'm sure there's other steps. But if you have a routine where you put your actual show clothes on, you're backstage, It could be that you're writing out a set list on a piece of paper. It could be that you're typing that same thing out on your phone. It could be that you run the first 5 minutes of your set. It could be a combination of all those different things. If you do that same routine every time, you can start to condition your body for that to be the cue that means I need to go in and focus on doing comedy. And so just naturally, on a subconscious level, even, you start to prepare yourself mentally for what you're about to go do. Like every professional athlete has some kind of routine they do before the big game. Performers like Dan come out and have these steps that they take. So that's a piece of it. I have a routine as well. And, it's writing out my set list. It is running the first 5 minutes of my set. And it's also listening to the entire set that I have from a previous time that I've done it, just kind of going through and just kind of hearing it. I'm an auditory person, and I like to take in things. So that's a part of it. And then depending on the gig, I also kind of put like finish the wardrobe off, very similar steps. So that's definitely a piece of it. For some people who might be tactile people, like they can work their feelings out by doing something, that something could be writing. So to get your mind flowing in a different direction, maybe journal a little bit in your joke book or whatever you have with you on some of these thoughts that you're going through right now. And with any luck, it could even be good material later. But for now, it'll get your mind kind of focused on where you need to be. Just make the topic about trying to focus on the show, but acknowledge that these things are going on in your life in a way that helps you center on the objective. It could help some people.
No, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like the answer to change your mindset and get ready for comedy is to kind of have a routine, like you're getting ready for a job. Whether and what little elements of that routine are is up to you, whether it's listening to music, journaling, putting on your show clothes, whatever. But it's good to just have a routine that gets you, you're thinking, because as you're getting ready and you're doing these things, you're thinking about comedy. So that's a, really good way to look at it. Get yourself a pre-show routine. Doesn't have to be a pre-show ritual, just a routine, something that you're doing. Just a string of 2 or 3 things that you do before every show to get ready for that show, I think is the route you want to go. And hopefully that helps you. And next time you go to a show and you're feeling down on your way there, hopefully when you start doing your pre-show routine and then you do the show, it changes your mindset and you're ready to do comedy. And we would love to hear people who are listening to this. If you have things that you do, if you have pre-show rituals or things that you do that get you in the mindset of comedy, share them with us. We'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email. Send an email to the artofbombingpod@gmail.com, or you can join the Bomb Squad, Art of Bombing Bomb Squad Facebook group. All the links to all this stuff are in the show notes, but we would love to hear what you, the people listening, what you're doing to get yourself in the mindset of comedy. So let us know. Love to hear from you. All right, now it's that time. In the last episode of the Between Moms, we started a new segment called Ask Us Anything. I still don't have a bumper for that. I should have had one ready, but I don't because I'm not a professional and I don't take my job serious.
Oh, look at this.
But no, so this week we do have another question. It's from the same person that asked questions last time. It was actually kind of a follow-up. They had a whole bunch of questions. It was kind of a 2-parter. Last week, we covered the first part. The question was from Betsy Severin Miller. The first part that we covered in the last Between Bombs was, do you see your comedy as a product or a service, which we talked a lot about? And then another follow-up to that was, do you see it as this is how I am, take it or leave it, or I can bring what I have to this audience? So that's what the last question was. And then another follow-up was, which we should have answered last week because the question we're going to answer this week's a lot different. But a quick follow-up to that question was, how does that affect the way you deliver to different crowds? So for me personally, I think it also depends on the gig. That's kind of how I, determine how I deliver my product to different crowds. I'm not changing a lot. Like if I'm in front of a younger audience, I'm not changing my whole set just to, use cool words that they might understand, if that makes sense.
Right.
I mean, I just I gauge it on the energy of the room. I guess reading the room is how I decide.
Yeah. Depending on how much material you have, your method of reading the room could be to deliver a standard opening that's maybe 5 or 6 minutes, but it includes different themes that you can use as, maybe a pitch pipe or, feedback from the room to tell you which avenue to go down. So if you have some dark comedy, some light kind of family comedy, and some sports comedy, and all those things,
use them all as testers. You just throw them all at the beginning, see what's working.
Yeah.
And then if like you said, if it's the lighthearted stuff that does better than the other topics you covered in that first 5 minutes, try to do more lighthearted stuff the rest of the set.
Yeah. And if you've got the material and you have the experience of being able to adapt that quickly in the middle of a set, then that's a good way to go. But it could depend on the length of the set too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the length of the set definitely is a big factor in that. Now, the question we really wanted to get to this week, this was part of the question from Betsy Severin Miller, but it is it's not a follow-up to those questions. It's totally its own question, and I think it's a fantastic question. And the question is, how do you approach practicing for a corporate show at an open mic where the audience is drunk college kids? And honestly, I don't think there's a good answer to that other than my real and true answer is just work through it, knowing that they're not going to care. But if it's helping you practice, and so then you can go back and listen to the set and kind of figure out, kind of what's working, what's not, and just, mostly just forget that practice just to get it out there.
Yeah.
That's why, it's hard that's how I feel about any open mic. How do you tell any open mic how your material is? It's a tough, because sometimes there's just comics at open mics, or there's nobody there, you use the open mic to me as just a way to practice, get out there and if they don't react, don't worry about it.
Yeah. I think, and the listener who posted that question may be, not of the same demographic as the people at the open mic. And I consider myself to be aligned to that, right? Like, I go to open mics and all my jokes are for the corporate world. They can work in the corporate world well. And the closest overlap I have is that I'm a dad. And I have kids, and I'm married, right? Which may not even connect to the crowd that's going to be in an open mic for people, younger than you.
Or people that, that might not connect to even just a regular audience at an open mic. Sure. You know what I mean? Whether they're drunk college kids or not, they might be college graduates, and still that material might not be relatable because they're not married with kids or, whatever it is.
Yeah. But we talk a lot, Dan, about setting goals at an open mic, right?
Yep.
So if that's you, if Betsy's question kind of resonates to you, I would say that you have to set your goals appropriately at the open mic. And Dan gave us great examples, right? Like, let's use it to practice getting it out of our mouths and seeing how it lands. We also have to know that the goal for this open mic can't be that I'm going to crush because I'm not talking to my crowd. But the goal could be that I get some light chuckles or some attention out of the crowd. And that's maybe the 10 that I'm after. And then I use that at different open mics, and I collect a lot of data to see how people are responding to it, knowing that, the best I can do on a scale of 10 is a 6 in this particular place. So I think just collecting the data and just being honest and setting goals about what you have will help you do that. But going to a lot of them and kind of gauging different crowds is a part of it. It's important.
Yep. And I think to your point too, with setting the goals and stuff, sometimes the goal for, in a situation like what this question is referring to, sometimes the goal is just to get comfortable on stage again, because maybe you haven't been up for a minute and you got a corporate gig coming up. You just need to go get on stage just so you feel relaxed when you go do your gig. And the other part of that, is that maybe the goal is to bomb. That way you don't bomb at the gig, because sometimes the bombing is like it's cliche, but it's a ticking time bomb. You have all these amazing sets, it's coming. So maybe the point is to go to these open mics so you will bomb and get that off you. So when you go do your actual gig, you're ready to destroy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a very insightful episode of Between Bombs Callbacks. We appreciate you guys listening and supporting the show. If you have a question, like I said, we're doing this Ask Us Anything section now on the Between Bombs. It can be life advice. It can be comedy advice. It can be whatever if you just want to call us names, we probably won't read that because we don't like mean people, but you can send those, you can message us on all our social media, Art of Bombing Pod, or send us an email, the Art of Bombing Pod at gmail.com. Comment the question in the Facebook group, all the places. All that stuff is down in the show notes. And most importantly, make sure you're following us wherever you listen to podcasts or watch these podcasts. And thank you. And we'll be back next week with an all new episode. Until then, we will see you later.
This has been a Dan Bublitz comedy production. Roar.